Hello and welcome to this Vox Markets webinar. I'm very pleased to be joined by George Frangeskides today. He's going to take us through a short company update. And remember that if you have any questions during, just hit the Q&A button and we'll make sure to cover them in the second half of this webinar where George will go through the questions. Over to you, George.
Thanks, Lauren. Hi, everybody. As Lauren says, we'll be doing a short presentation followed by lots of questions that we want to get through. So I'll try and speed through the presentation, but bearing in mind that there'll be some people who haven't heard it before, who've maybe logged on for the first time, want to hear about Alba. So I will just give a brief overview of where things are at. So obviously the usual disclaimer, no forward-looking statements and the rest. Overview, who are we? We've got basically the entire Dolgellau Gold Belt in North Wales under license to Alba. That means we have the Clogau St David's gold mine, the Gwynfinith gold mine, and the entire Dolgellau Gold exploration project under exclusive ownership, 100% Alba. And that means there's a huge number of targets, not only the old mines that have still prospective targets within them, but also the regional ground as well has a multitude of targets. We've got significant investments, in particular Green Rock Mining, which we floated in late 21 and has done great work since in terms of progressing, in particular the Aeromagnetic graphite project, which we, it's very much looking like a world-class asset in the making. Our focus has always been on brownfield projects to reduce execution risk and time. Obviously, we've had a few reversals on that front in terms of Clogau of late with permitting. Obviously, we'll be touching on that quite a bit in the coming minutes. And we're looking to expand our portfolio as well by looking at complementary assets. So where are we at with Clogau currently? Well, a lot of you will know we had permits issued in respect of the dewatering exploration of our primary target, which is the Lower Llechfraith. And you can see that here. Sorry, I've just moved the wrong slide. Let me go back. Right, so you can see here what I'm talking about, which is that the workings are flooded essentially under the Llechfraith level. So all the blue is the flooded areas, and we sought permits essentially, having drilled that down into those flooded workings. And if I move one slide or two forward, I'll tell you what I'm talking about here. You can see it better here, in fact. You can see the flooded workings in blue, and you can see this massive target under the flooded workings, and that's a target that we've generated through our drilling. And those traces there, you can see our drill traces. They're all the drilling that we've done to determine and define this massive 120-meter deep extension, or what we think is a projected extension of the Llechfraith pay shoot. So that was a pay shoot that's previously bearing in gold and mined, and we have, as I say, structurally determined an extension to that pay shoot. Now, we don't know what the grades are there, but if it's an extension to the pay shoot, we would expect there to be similar, pretty non-homogeneous distribution of gold, because that's the nature of the system that we're dealing with, but pockets of high-grade gold as well as lower background levels of gold. So that is what we need to determine by dewatering those workings above, so we can get down into that target, do some bulk sampling using Windsors, going down about 10 meters, several Windsors going about down 10 meters, picking up hundreds of tons of material and bulk sampling it. That's the name of the game. We, if I can go back to the previous slide about permits. Now, since 21, as some of you will know, and it's been an incredibly painful and difficult process, I have to say, we've been involved in a habitat regulations assessment of the mine, helping NRW to complete that exercise. That took a very long time and a lot of effort and data generation analysis on our part. But following that process, we did finally, in July of this year, get dewatering and protected species licenses granted. So that was a fantastic result. We mobilized immediately to site. Our contractors started work within days of getting those permits on the safety and access works, because we were ready, to go with that. We had everything ready to go, contractors, material, all the rest of it. We then started dewatering. It got down to 6 meters in pretty short order. But unfortunately, then exceptionally heavy rainfalls hit North Wales, as they hit a lot of parts of the UK. But when I say exceptional, I mean, if you look at a chart of weather rainfall data for the nearest rainfall gauge to the mine, we were looking at about 290, I think, millimeters of rain in July. There hasn't been anything like that level of rain on that rainfall gauge since it started being recorded, rainfall in that area, since the 1830s. We're talking about a once in more than 100-year, well, more than almost 200-year experience, unfortunately. And so what that meant was we reflooded. The level of pumping that we were allowed to do under the permits was insufficient to deal with such exceptional situation, and we essentially over time reflooded. Now we are currently pumping at 30 meters cubed per day, and that is insufficient to deal with the excess rainfall that we're still seeing flushing through the system. We have sought two things at present. One is a temporary extension to our higher rate pumping period of 100 cubic meters per day, to be able to abstract 100 up to the settlement tank and then discharge that. That is in discussion. We have also sought and applied for long-term permit variations, which are to allow us to pump at higher rates, up to 250 cubic meters per day. And those applications are in process, and I can talk about those more, I think, when I pick up the questions. So that's what we're doing about trying to fix this issue, and it is incredibly frustrating for us, as I'm sure it is for all shareholders, that we're in this position. And we can talk about the whys and wherefores, but more importantly, what we're doing about it, as I say in the Q&A to come. Safety works, well, we did a lot of great safety works at the levels 2 and 3. When we were able to dewater those down to 6 meters, we got into levels 2 and 3. We put in place ladderways, safety platforms, in order to be able to get down to level 4, which is where we need to be to start doing the exploration work. So that work is all there. It's in place. And as soon as we can get down to level 4, then we will do a similar exercise level 4 with safety works. We don't know exactly what we're going to find on level 4. We've got obviously historical maps, but don't forget this is flooded for decades, so we really don't know what we're going to find. But whatever we find, we'll be able to deal with in terms of safety works, access down to level 4, ladderway, and then start exploration. So that's the name of the game. But as I say, lots of work has already been put in place, so the time has not been wasted, albeit that by now we would have expected to be down at level 4. So we are, we are where we are, but it is very frustrating for all of us. We've touched on this. Why are we looking down here at Lower Llechfraith? I've told you about the massive target that we've got down under the flooded workings, and the main node extension as well is another big target, but we are focused currently on the Lower Llechfraith. There's the waste tip at Clogau, historical material that's been sitting in a tip in places up to 10 meters deep. We've done a lot of pitting there and sampling, and we've returned grades up to 11 grams per ton, but average grades of sort of for the fine fraction, the less than 1 mil fraction, of about 2.13 grams per ton. So pretty credible grades for a tip. It's material that's at or near surface, of course. It's not, again, homogeneous, and there will be different periods of mining that have led to waste rock, or what they considered to be waste rock in those days, being put on the tip. Of course, some of it is waste rock. It's country rock, which was from development of the adits in the mine. So, but having sampled the best areas, we are confident that there is definitely a separate, if you like, project here at Clogau to do with the waste tip. I can talk again in the Q&A about where we're at with that, but it is something, as I say, on a sort of separate track to the work underground and in the mine. We've at the same time got massive exploration potential on the regional ground that we've got. We've got at least 6 gold. I mean, we've got several more than 6 gold targets, but the high priority targets are these 6 shown on the map here. And some of them we're going to be testing with the airborne geophysical survey that we're going to be doing. And I'm pleased to say that after, again, a very long permitting process, we believe we are extremely close now to a final permit approval decision from the CAA, the Civil Aviation Authority, so we can crack on with that in September. We know all about Welsh Gold. Maybe those of you joining for the first time will be surprised to hear that Welsh Gold commands a premium over the spot price of gold, always has done, partially to do with its scarcity, partially to do with the fact that it's a heritage asset. You know, it's Welsh Gold. It comes with a history of heritage. It has a royal connection, and there isn't much of it around. And so if we are and expect to be the sole producer of new Welsh Gold and new Clogau Gold, then we expect that spot price to continue, and that we'd be able to control essentially the market to an extent in terms of how much gold we release into the market, and make sure we do retain that premium price for what we hope to be products ranging from potential jewelry products to more investables like gold coins or rounds and gold bars. Won't touch on this too much because we haven't got a lot of time, but we are a 42% odds shareholder in GreenRock Mining. We had all of these assets in GreenRock that we spun out into that late 21. We had them in Alba, of course. Alba was a very diversified company, had a lot of projects going on without being able to focus on all of them for a junior company, so it made sense to spin them out. GreenRock's done phenomenally well in terms of pushing its projects forward since 2021, and Alba's been heavily involved with that, of course, as the major shareholder. I'm on the board, Mark Austin's on the board, and we're, as I say, heavily involved in pushing GreenRock forward. We did participate in the last raise of the company because we really believe in Amitsoq and the other projects, and we want to see our share properly reflected in the progress that's being made. So where we can, we've certainly wanted to follow our money in Alba in GreenRock. Lots to talk about in terms of GreenRock and Amitsoq and getting it into development and production. It is, as I say, pretty much on track. EIA, environmental impact assessment, social impact assessment, PEA, preliminary economic assessment. These are all very important studies and reports that are in process. And if you follow GreenRock, I'm sure you'll get a more up-to-date and detailed snapshot of where we're at with things in GreenRock. But as I say, things are moving forward as expected presently, and it's, you know, Amitsoq is looking, as I say, like a world-class project in the making. Very, very high grade, a lot of graphite, and of course, very importantly, a country and mining system that is very, very favourable to what we're trying to do and very supportive of what we're trying to do at GreenRock. So that's also very important to bear in mind. Corporate activities, I increased this is a while back, I increased in the last year my holding in Alba to 48 million shares, and intend to do so again. We got new advisors at Clogau and in relation to Clogau in terms of the gold supply side. We bought out the rest of Clogau in the last year. We surrendered Limerick because we had access issues for drilling, and you know, there comes a point where it becomes too hard, and I'm afraid it became too hard at Limerick to push that project forward in the way that we wanted to. We've assessed a load of new project opportunities and we continue to do that. And we are focused on getting a complementary asset that's going to drive value forward for Alba shareholders. So looking ahead, we're very bullish about our prospects for gold. Yes, we have had some difficulties with permitting of late. We are confident we will, of course, overcome the latest difficulties. The HRA process will provide a framework for that going forward, which will help. I'm confident in that. Green Rock is doing phenomenally well, rapid progress at Amitsoq towards development, and will continue to be heavily involved in that. We're looking at value-adding acquisitions, and where we're at in terms of our asset portfolio and investment portfolio, gold and critical minerals, I think is a very strong place to be. So the future prospects are still very, very strong for Alba. So that, Lauren, is really a very quick run through of our assets and where we're at. I'm happy to take all the questions you've got.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for that presentation.
The time available.
Yeah, no. Well, I'll jump straight in because I'm conscious of time. So if we first go to questions surrounding the clock owl dewatering, the first one is, I understand that the dewatering process has been a cause of concern for you and all shareholders. I want to assure you that your professionalism guided us through a challenging period. With the onset of winter, are you usually using the best contractors in the industry to ensure that the work is done efficiently and effectively so that the dewatering process does not become a problem again?
Oh, yes, we are. We're using very, very good British consultants on geochemistry and hydrogeology. On the species side, we've got brilliant consultants there who've really helped us through this whole process. It has been painstaking. We have written, chapters, reams and reams of data has been produced, and all to support what we think is a fairly straightforward exercise. But you still have to convince the regulator of your case, and where there are issues, you have to mitigate them. We've put in these bat exclusion zones. We have, which was a requirement of the permitting. On the bat side of things, we have put in place a settlement tank on the water side, which was a requirement of the, on the water permitting side. And we've been limited by, the permits in terms of how much we can abstract or transfer up to the Lecfraith settlement tank. So, but yes, I'm confident we've got the best people. Winter, well, that's one of the reasons why we're applying for a variation now, is that what we've seen in August is, July in particular, sorry, is an extraordinary amount of rainfall that has ended up, beyond anyone's worst expectations. And as a result of that, we've had two 48-hour rainfall events in July that you only ever get typically once a year in that part of Wales, and obviously not in July. So, we've had, unfortunately, an exceptionally bad run of it, and the permitting levels have not been sufficient to deal with it. So, it is what it is, but we are now looking to rectify that as quickly as we possibly can.
Yeah. And then moving on, was there any knowledge of the rainfall that happened within Snowdonia since 2017? Is there any option of having an increase of dewatering due to increases of rainfall?
Yes, exactly right. There is a possibility of that. The issue we've got is how quickly can we get it in place, right? So I've literally just come off the phone before this call, which is why I might sound a little bit all over the place. I don't know if I do, but there you go. Because I've just come off the phone to NRW this morning about exactly this, timelines. They are an organization that is incredibly busy, has an incredible number of applications before them at any one time. We are not the only people. And we're probably not the only people who've suffered from these extreme weather events either. So, we have to take that in mind, and we've always worked with the regulators, whether it's NRW or the Planning Authority or whoever, try to work in cooperation and mutual understanding of their issues and ours. We don't intend to do anything that is detrimental to the environment, and that is our bottom line. But we'd also love to get this project moving forward within those constraints and moving forward at pace. So we've been having discussions with them, and they are very understanding of the situation that we're in, having just literally got permits and then find within a matter of weeks that they are insufficient to do the job at hand. So we are working with them to push these variation applications forward. We are also talking to the operations side, NRW, to see if there are any temporary mitigations and extensions that can be utilized here to help unblock the situation whilst we wait for those longer term permit variations. So I'm not going to give timelines because I don't know them, but we are doing everything we can, and so is NRW, to be fair, at present, to try to help us to rectify the situation. As soon as I have anything more concrete, then I will obviously advise the market and shareholders.
Yeah, well, thank you. And once the dewatering has been completed, will it be easier to maintain even if there's heavy rainfalls?
Look, I think yes, in theory, but our base rate pumping is 30 cubic meters a day, and there is a question I think that you might have had about who set these rates. Well, on the abstraction side, we had a higher rate pumping rate of 100 cubic meters per day, then falling after a period of time to 30 as a base rate and that was the idea, was to maintain the levels dewatered using 30 cubic meters a day. We've got a discharge permit long term for 100. So once you transfer the water into the settlement tank, you can then discharge 100 into the river. If you've seen the videos that we've released, the water's incredibly clean. All we're doing is removing a bit of sediment from the tank and it goes back in the river. So I've forgotten what the question was. That's probably my fault.
Once the dewatering has been completed, will it then be easier to maintain if there's heavy rainfall?
Well, I think that's where the long-term permits come in. I think experience is showing that 30, yes, on normal conditions should be sufficient to maintain it dewatered once it is dewatered. But our long-term variation applications are looking for 250 for a period of time, as and when as necessary to dewater, and then a higher base rate to keep it dewatered. Now, there is a question as to who decided these levels. Look, we did apply for higher rate thresholds for pumping, and it's not a criticism at all. It is just, looking at the data, NRW believed that 100 was sufficient. And looking at the data on an average basis, 100 is sufficient, right, to dewater these levels. And it did get us down to 6 meters, and we would have carried on and finished the job had we not had these exceptionally heavy rains over the entirety of July, really. So 100, I understand the basis for it, but we now know that we cannot rely on 100 if there are further exceptional heavy rainfall events. That's why we're asking for 250. We had originally asked for something like 250, and we don't have it. It is what it is, I'm afraid. But we're trying to resolve that, as soon as we can.
Yeah, no, thank you. And next question is, are you in regular communication with the NRW, or is it just a case of submit official documents and then wait and see? And do they have conversations with the officers on the phone before making official applications and changes?
Yes, we do. We talk to them as much as we possibly can. They're very busy people. We cannot get them on the phone or try to get them on the phone every day and bother them. But I just got off the phone to them this morning. We've had communication regularly in the last weeks. We have submitted the long-term application, long-term applications for variation of our existing permits. Those are in. We're waiting on allocation of resources at their end for that. They are doing what they possibly can to allocate resources to that. And once I know more and I'm able to be more definitive, I will be more definitive. But yes, we are having as many conversations as we possibly can with the different teams. That's permitting, There's water quality, there's water resources, there is species, not an issue right now. And there is the operations team as well at NRW. So that's an operational matter that we're in operations. So and they're all separate teams. They do talk to each other, I'm glad to say, but they are separate teams. There's a lot of conversations that we try to have on a regular basis.
Okay. Forgive me if you've already touched on this, but the next question is, how long do we expect a decision on variations to the permits to take?
Yeah, we have touched on it. You're quite right, and it's really
Yeah,
a watch this space. As soon as I can say something
yeah,
more definitive, I will. As I say, it is NRW do not have to do anything other than stick to statutory timelines. In this case, they are trying to help us to move it forward quicker than a base statutory timeline. So that is already a significant significant fact.
yeah.
But other than that, I can't be more definitive right now.
Perfect. And who was responsible for setting the discharge rate on the original permits, Alba or NRW?
Well, again, I touched on NRW set the rate. Essentially, they'll tell you what they will be happy with you applying for. That's a conversation, and we provide data which says that we think we need X. They look at the data and their own data and say we're happy with Y. They'll tell you why. It's not just a sort of blanket no. And we kind of ended up with Y. It is what it is, and it's insufficient for our exceptional situation, but we're working on it. So at the end of the day, NRW make the decision and we have to live with it, but we are trying to, as I say, resolve that.
Perfect. And final question in this sort of section, would you be willing to invite shareholders to do a site visit and meet and greet so we can talk to geologists?
Maybe not a site visit. I tell you why, because it's an operational site, right? And it is very difficult. It's a small site. I'm sure if we had what we can do. I mean, so it's an operational site. It's a closed site. So that is very difficult to do. We have got works going on. It is not the safest place in the world. People need to have PPE, safety equipment, and all the rest of it. We can't have 100 people on site. Neither can we pick and choose who we'd like there and who we'd have to exclude. So it's very difficult to see that happening whilst we're operational. We can have and have had open days, and so we'll happily run another open day. I'll find out a timeline for that. It will be in Dolgellau most likely, or Bontddu, which is the nearest village. If people want to come to that, they'll be more than welcome. We're happy to do that in the next few months. So I'll get that sorted and advised to everybody. So that's an opportunity to meet everybody in the team and talk about things. And yeah.
Perfect. And then moving on, just to the Dolgellau Gold Regional Exploration. How is the permit for the Aeromagnetic survey mapping going? The next part of this question was planned summer, November 2022, spring 2023, and can you chat a bit more about how it will be planned in September?
Yeah. No, I'm unfortunately I'm well aware of the roll call of dates that have come and gone, and I'm afraid to say, again, no one's fault, but it is very much with the regulator, the Civil Aviation Authority, who've had a huge backlog, as I understand it, of applications of various types. This needs the consent and permitting of the CAA. We are flying over, I think they call them danger zones. It sounds worse than it is, I think. So they need to give permission to us to fly in particular zones and to get clearance, to do this, because obviously we're flying a fixed wing aircraft. It's a small aircraft. It's a UAV, an unmanned aerial vehicle, but it is an item in the sky. It needs permission, clearance to fly, take off, move around on a specific flight path, and then come back to base. And that has taken an inordinately long amount of time, I'm afraid. But we look like we are at the very, very final step in that, getting that permit so that we can fly in September. I've already told the market that, and we are still on track for that. Barring some last minute reverse, we would expect to be running that survey in September.
Perfect. And then moving on to the waste tip, how is progress for the waste tips being managed, and do we have any timeframes?
Yeah, look, we have been very blunt about this. We did not want to pursue permitting for the waste tip whilst our number one target at Lower Elecfraith was under, a permitting process. We then got through the permitting process for the dewatering of the Lower Elecfraith, and then we, within weeks, have had this setback, and let's call it what it is, a setback at the Lower Elecfraith in our dewatering. But so that, again, all focus is on that and resolving that situation. We are ready pretty much to submit a pre-application inquiries, very detailed pre-application inquiries. That's the precursor to a full planning application to the planning authority, and that will likely go in a matter of days, and that will then spark discussions on that side of things, and it will involve NRW. So you'll understand where there is a limit to resource in government and in government agencies, and we have been very mindful of that, and our focus is on the Lower Elecfraith, but we will nonetheless be presenting our pre-application inquiries document to the planning authority, but we will probably at the same time have discussions to say, we understand that there are timing constraints here, and they can't drop everything for Alba Minerals, believe it or not. So there will have to be a discussion about resourcing and how that gets best dealt with on the NRW side, because they know about it. It's in our HRA, in the Habitat Regulations Assessment. There's a detailed description of the waste tip, but now there's an even more detailed description of the project and how we intend to go about it. And that will be the environmental issues aren't legion. They're not huge in terms of waste tip, but there are some which they need to be happy with, of course. And the planning authority, I think more significantly, it's going to be a full scale planning application. So, but as I say, short answer, we expect to be able to send that in the next days, and that will start a formal process. And as I say, there is a reason why we've held back, but there comes a point where we will get it in, but we'll have a discussion about, as I say, resourcing that and making sure it doesn't delay anything on the dewatering. That's the most critical path.
Right, and you've sort of answered the second part of this next question, but if we could just cover, do you think that the waste tip application is viable, and what's the estimated costs and profit margins?
Yeah, look, we're doing all that work. I mean, it hasn't been released. It's very difficult for a public company to release information about that, which isn't sort of subject to an independent like PEA, like a preliminary economic assessment. When we have had discussions with the regulators about the scale of the exercise that we're planning to do, and we got feedback as to what is viable and what may not be viable, or maybe it's all viable, then we'll be able to target, and refine our numbers better, and with a view to putting out a PEA that then explains a little bit more about, profit margins, CapEx, OpEx, and all the rest of it. So work that we've done, of course, but there are lots of variables still, so nothing that I can really talk to right now.
And then moving on to our general questions, are there any plans to further explore MLE?
Yes, the main load extension. Yes, sorry, I was trying to think there. What's it? MLE? Yes, the main load extension. Yes, of course there are, but again, we are a small junior company with limited resources that we're trying to target in the right way to get value for shareholders. We cannot do everything, and you'll appreciate, even if we had the resources to throw out the main load extension right now, we would overwhelm the regulators with yet more applications in relation to the work that we want to do there. To get to the main load extension, we need to put in development. To put in development, we need permits. And so we are not, that has always been our secondary target. So it's there, it's not going anywhere. We will get to it, but we are focused on the Lower Elecfraith, and that's where we've been very consistent in saying that.
And next question is, with the Welsh Gold potentially available all along the Dolgellau belt, we have a fantastic, unique product. What plans are being put into place to exploit this marvelous opportunity other than mining?
Other than mining, well, I'm not sure what that it sort of is envisaging, but we've always had the idea that we won't just mine, that we will produce products that have significantly enhanced value. In other words, we're not interested in selling gold to somebody else to make, multiple times returns on the production of jewelry or in the production of coins and rounds and gold bars and investables like that. We want to be doing that so that we secure those margins for shareholders. And that's where this project has always been, why it's always been interesting, is securing those premiums on the ultimate product that you produce. So that hasn't changed, and it's not about just about mining. It's about mining and then marketing and selling and manufacturing. So it's a manufacturing model. It's a vertical integration exercise that we're looking at. And that's why we brought in Vivian Johnston, who's a gold supply chain expert, market expert in gold and jewelry generally, and the market in the UK in particular. So a huge amount of expertise, and we haven't been able to use Vivian a lot yet because we're not where we expected to be right now, but we've certainly had a lot of conversations and she's done some work, and so we've got a baseline for working on when we get closer to production. So that's all in hand. Other things, information centres, tourism, very important in North Wales. Dolgellau, Snowdonia National Park, it is a phenomenal tourist zone and area, and we will add to that at some point when it's appropriate to do so with information centres and attractions and things like that. But let's get the gold first.
Great. And this next question reads, what are the offtake plans from VG?
VG.
The letter V and a G, yeah.
Okay. Well, assuming we're talking about clog eyes still, maybe I'm wrong, but if we're still talking about clog eye, then look, we could potentially enter into joint ventures with brands or operations that are existing in terms of smelting and processing and production of bars and coins and the rest of it. Those options are all available to us. I know what the different routes are. We've been talking to various people about that, including, as I say, Vivian, who's got a lot of expertise in that. And but nothing determined, nothing definitive. We will find and select the best alternative that gives us best return in the quickest possible time.
Perfect. And then moving on to sort of PR questions. This question says, I appreciate costs may be a factor in public relations expenditure, but I believe the PR company is not replying to emails and seems not to be working effectively for Alba. What are the current and ongoing plans for public and investor relations going forward for Alba?
Well, okay. Well, as far as I know, our PR are very experienced at brides, and probably the number one PR company for companies in our space. There's a bit of a advert for them. I don't know why I did that, but there you go. It's free. They are really good and really experienced people, and as far as I know, have been answering questions. Look, let's be honest, they do get some quite in your face kinds of questions, which are hard to answer, and they do get the odd aggressive questioner, and that is quite difficult. And people will have to understand that everyone needs to be treated with courtesy and respect, and people are very frustrated by what they see as a lack of progress or reverses, and I totally understand that. But they do, as far as I know, answer all the questions they get that are answerable, shall we put it that way. And but I will ask the question as to whether there's anything that there's any backlog of questions that need answering. And in terms of going forward, I've got in mind some improvements to PR generally. And look, one thing to say, it's very difficult to keep pumping out happy-go-lucky posts and tweets in a situation such as we've been in the last few weeks. We have a lot of good stuff to say, but the reality is we've had a reverse, we've had a setback, and let's not try and, you know, puff it up into something it isn't. It's been a setback and it's incredibly frustrating. We have worked our team incredibly hard to get to the position where we finally got those permits, to only find that they're insufficient for what we needed to do. No point going over the history. I've already been over that. But, you know, to then pump out a load of, you know, stuff, puff pieces about stuff, it's very difficult to do that, right? And so, and I don't want to sugarcoat it for people. And so if there's been a drop off in PR, and you'll probably tell people say, well, it's been before that. And fair enough, if people think there hasn't been enough, the typical approach from PR is to say you shouldn't be putting out more than, you know, I mean, some people say one tweet. We talk about just Twitter or whatever the hell it's called today. X, terrible name. Mr. Musk. It is, you know, people say one tweet every 2 weeks. Some people say 1 or 2 every week at most. You know, some people want us to be constantly in contact every day. But, you know, there's a limit to what you can usefully say. And in a situation like this, when we're in operational constraints, when we're talking to the regulators, there is, I'm afraid, just a limit to what we can say at any time in particular. But we will try to do better, I promise. You know, and people think that there isn't enough communication, and I take that on board. We will do more of this, okay, which is more of a live answering all the questions. I don't care what they are, unless they're rude. We'll answer all the questions, and it'll be what it will be. But I will never be able to answer anything that is price sensitive, commercially sensitive, operational detail that hasn't been put to the whole market. The only way to put that out is by RNS, and that will continue to be the case. But where I can give updates within those margins, then I will, and we'll try and do it more often.
No, thank you. And I think you've really there covered the other 2 questions that we have sort of within the PR space. You've covered social media there, and yeah, just talking about live question and answers. So I guess just for time's sake, we'll move on to capital raising and corporate actions. So the recent placing and broker offer seem to have caused prior existing shareholders concerns. I appreciate the business needs for the $750,000 placing, as this was a good opportunity to expedite the dewatering and safety of the mine. But the broker offer was badly handled, and in part the broker, of which at least one genuine shareholder was not able to have the order filled. What plans are there in place to ensure that all investors are able to purchase shares from further placings and broker offers?
Yeah, that's a very good question. It has been an imperfect situation. We have tried to use this broker option offer to try to plug a gap that exists in regulation. In other words, you know, companies like ours typically do private placings, and they are, you know, broker-led, and it's very hard for people who are not sophisticated investors or fall within certain regulatory exemptions to participate. The easiest way for them to participate is through another broker. The issue with that is that a lot of people hold shares through Hargreaves Lansdown and Interactive and all the rest of it, and those platforms are not geared up to taking orders, individual orders, and then putting them to our broker at CMC Markets and saying we've got an order. That isn't what they do. So now, if you have a traditional stockbroker, you can obviously do that and say, please phone CMC and place an order or express an interest in this placing or any future placings, and that's possible. And that's what the broker option is there to do. It's for brokers to talk to brokers, and so that is a limited use to people, and I appreciate that. There are other platforms out there. They have mixed reputations in terms of, again, how much money they raise and how much they cost to put on. There is a very big one, primary bid, but that's for big raises, not for the sorts of raises that we're talking about, IPOs and very large secondary raises. But our broker is looking into, as I understand it, a platform that would help going forward, where they might be able to offer something like this themselves, but I don't have any more on that. You know, it is what it is. We tried our best to make it open to people, but it was limited, the amount of interest that there was, because, as think of the constraints of having to go broker to broker. I don't know about the one person who wasn't able to participate. I can ask the question of the brokers on that, but I don't think it was a significant order. And of course, that doesn't matter. If it's an order, it's an order. But I would be surprised if it was anything other than just difficulty of managing something like that in the timescale that was available. Yeah, so look, it's work in progress. We'd like to do better on that. There is no reason not to involve shareholders. The obvious way to do it is by an open offer to all shareholders. It's costly, and you don't know that you're going to even recoup your costs in doing an exercise like that. It's a legal process. You need, you've got lawyers' bills and the rest of it, and documentation, and it's a costly process. So it's not something that is easy for a junior company like ours to do. An open offer to all shareholders. So we try to find other avenues to let shareholders in. So we are aware and working on making that better.
Thank you. And this next question from an investor reads, why did he do a raise less than 24 hours after the most important news event that long-term holders had suffered and waited 2 years for? The adultation followed by crushing defeat broke me.
Oh, well, I'm sorry about that. Look, crushing defeat, I know the feeling, but we're not defeated. So, stick with it, guys, because, we are working hard to turn it around. But in terms of that specific question, why the timing? Well, I haven't forensically examined the timescales, but my recollection is that we certainly did not want to raise money when we were in the middle of this reverse, when we were in the doldrums, when we hadn't got the permits yet. But, unfortunately, time costs a company like ours money. And in that process of several months, years as it turned out, the money that we raised previously gets expended on things other than what you want to expend it on, which is works on the site and in the project. So you end up spending money on overheads and stock exchange fees and accountants and lawyers and brokers and all the rest of the things that every single listed company has, I'm afraid, as a fixed cost. And as a result, your cash whittles down. And that is the worst place to be, because you're spending money on things that you don't want to be spending money on, but you have to, just to keep the lights on, as they say, but you're not progressing your project. So that is the absolute worst place to be, and we do not want to be there. But that is the result of what happened with the delays in permitting. And so when we got the permits through finally, we hadn't raised money prior to that. I'm pretty sure we would have got a bounce in our share price, and then we raised some money because we needed that money then to replenish our coffers and get on with our work, right? So it is what it is. That is the reality of where we were at, and we can't work and we can't progress these projects without funds. And so we did our best to wait until we had a good decision, a positive outcome, and then raise money. I think that was the right thing to do.
Perfect. And this next investor would like to know why in nearly 2 years hasn't George yourself bought in?
I think I did buy in the last 2 years. I think we just said that in the presentation, but
Yeah.
I mean, I do intend to do more of that, and I'd like to do more, and there's no reason not to. I can't remember what the date was, but I'm sure it was in our presentation just now, that I did recently, or in the relative recent past. But I will do more of that. I'd like to do more, and people find it odd to believe that it's so hard to find open periods. It is really hard to find open periods within the Alba and the Green Rock space, for various reasons. There's a lot going on at any one time, and then you have the statutory closed periods to do with accounts twice a year for 2 months, or pretty much 1 to 2 months, depending on what it is. So that limits you, and there's a lot going on at any one time. But yes, there are possibilities and there are avenues, and we do explore those, and I will do that. some more in the near future.
And then moving on to new projects, will Alba be adding new projects to give shareholders value? To name a few, like Limerick, Mauritius, Brockham, these were just given away with no value for the shareholders.
Okay, well, Limerick, we couldn't drill anymore. We couldn't get permissions from landowners to drill our targets, and those targets were expensive, more expensive than our original targets, which we couldn't get landowner consent for. So there comes a point where you just got to give up and spend your money where it is going to give you more bang for your buck, potentially. So that's what happened with Limerick, and that was the right thing to do. Though not Mauritius, I think they might mean Mauritania. That's even before my time. It was uranium project, early stage exploration. Before my time, didn't have a thing to do with it, but there were reasons for moving that on as well. Uranium went through a terrible time for many years, hasn't really recovered much since. So there were good reasons for not progressing that asset in a very difficult part of the world as well, geopolitically. And Brockham, the guys at Brockham didn't managed to get the results they were hoping for from the Brockham XR4 well, I think it was. The project wasn't making money, and sticking with it was costing us money, because when you're on the license, you have to contribute to costs or forfeit your interest. So the best thing for us at that point was to get out, and that's what we did. So all of those decisions were taken for the right reasons in the interest of the company, and I'm perfectly happy with the decisions that were made, and I think they were the right ones.
Great. And then just moving on to one of the final questions that we got sent in, we'll move over to the ones that we've got also during this webinar shortly. Final question, what's the plan with HH, I believe that's Horse Hill. Are we able to get our loan returned?
It's a shareholder loan, and shareholder loans get paid out of profits. Right, so there are insufficient profits coming from the production at Horse Hill to pay out shareholder loans, and that's the reality of the situation. The drilling of more wells, more vertical wells, not horizontal ones that they did a few years back, which failed, but simple vertical wells would, we think, up the production at Horse Hill and give us all a chance to get some payback for our significant investment there. UKOG, I think, don't, I'm not sure if they said definitively, but they're certainly looking at farm out opportunities. So they're not, seems minded to do any drilling, but looking for others to potentially do some drilling there. So we'd obviously support that, and we'd like to see some of our money back. But, you know, that is dependent on increased production from drilling. They have got the permits to do it, so that's the good thing. And there's a lot of discussion about oil, of course, and the future of that, but this isn't a situation, as far as I understand it, where those licenses certainly are not under threat, and they are long-term licenses, and they do allow for further drilling. So as long as that continues, then we would encourage, obviously, third parties to come in and drill a vertical or more, 1 or 2 verticals, and get the production rate up at Horse Hill.
Perfect. And then with all the exploration and testing phases, why have we never seen actual physical clock owl gold even finds?
Well, because we're in exploration and testing, right? And you know, I'm sure we have released pictures of our concentrates that we've produced. We've produced gold concentrates, and you know, we're happy to show you some pictures of those, but they are concentrates. So, you know, they're not refined gold. We haven't got to that stage of in exploration. So yeah, so that's why, really. You know, when we drilled for structure, and we get sniffs of gold in the drilling, but that's the nature of this project, I'm afraid. Narrow vein nuggety effect gold project. You drill it and you could miss a pocket of hundreds of ounces per ton of gold, just by, you know, a margin of 5 centimeters. You missed it, you know, because you can't drill at such narrow spacing. It's just uneconomic to do that. So it is the nature of the beast. We've had sniffs of gold, but yeah, nothing in the core that we could show you that shows visible gold. Unfortunately, just bad luck in drilling. We need lucky drillers, and we haven't had lucky drillers to hit those high grade veins yet. But yeah, look, we've got gold concentrates, but yeah, maybe if we haven't released them, happy to show photos of those, that's fine.
And then, as well as pumping out, is there any way of stopping or reducing the water entering?
No, not in a sense, no, because it is percolating through the rocks, fissures in the rocks coming from surface. It is obviously rainwater. It is not really possible to stop it entering the mine system in that way. The irony of it is that now that the workings are reflooded, that water is just basically going straight out the drainage adit and into the river. So, you know, it is incredibly frustrating that we are talking about rainwater here, which is otherwise going into the river anyway in much bigger quantities. We're not doing anything to it. Maybe it picks up a tiny amount of sediment on its way through to the river, but you know, it is incredibly frustrating that there isn't an answer to this situation that is, you know, crack on, guys. You know, there's nothing wrong with this. It's rainwater. We all know it's rainwater, right? It isn't some sort of murky, dirty mine water that's been sitting there for years. We are now talking about, you know, rainwater. Of course, there's stuff down at level 4 that's been sitting there for a while. But everything we've pumped out so far has been incredibly clean and within all the limits. So we're not expecting that to change when we get down to level 4. And now the dilutive effect of having all this extra rainwater in the flooded workings, it means that's even more the case, right? You know, and so it is incredibly frustrating that there is not a simple, quick solution to this. There are constraints under legislation, and if there was a simple, quick solution, then we are certainly looking to find that. You know, then we'll find it, right, with the best will in the world. But you know, there's no way of stopping the water getting in from surface.
Right. And apologies if you've touched on this, but is the water just finding its way through the ground, or could it be coming from the stream or river?
It's not coming, as far as we know, we're pretty clear it's not coming from the stream or river. It's coming from surface. It's rainwater. It's not groundwater as we call it, which is coming from within the rocks themselves. It's surface water. It's rainwater. That's what it is.
Perfect. Would it be possible to build a large settlement pond to allow higher pumping rates out of the mine, then keep to the lower allowed daily discharge to stream?
It's just too much. I mean, even the 100 cubic meters a day doesn't sound like a lot. And if you look at our video of a little trickle coming out of our pipe going to the river, you'll see that compared to the torrent of water that's going through the river and has been for the last few months, it's, you know, again, a very frustrating exercise, because you see the dilutive effect is massive presently. But even that 100 cubic meters a day, you can't keep replicating that and holding it somewhere. It's just not practical. It's just too much volume even for us to hold in a pond. Hold it back for what? You know, no regulator will be happy with that, because, you know, you're creating a problem. Then you've put it in a place and you can't discharge it. So that's not an answer. What we need is an answer that is both on the abstraction or transfer side and the discharge side, so they both work together properly and are sufficient to do the whole job. And that's what we're working on.
And this next investor would like to know, when will you announce a visitor day?
Well, I've just mentioned that we will do an open day, and we'll set a time for that in the next few months, hopefully. I'd like to do it when we've got some results out of the UAV survey, because I think will be very interesting, and that would mean probably around October time. Hopefully we'd also got some answers and a way forward on dewatering by then, but I think I'm looking at, you know, October, November time. So just watch this space, and I've just committed everybody up at Dolgethly to something that I haven't mentioned to them. So I should just check that we can do that, but I don't see any problem with it. We'll get that happening.
Great. So we've got 2 questions left coming in. If anyone else has any more, yeah, be sure to share them now. So final 2, have you tried panning the sediment coming up from the pumping?
We don't need to pan. Oh, pan it for what? For gold? No, there's no gold in the no, there's, well, if there is, it's tiny amounts. No, we're it's sediment. It's just it's, you know, it's silt. essentially. So no, we haven't done that. We would have picked up if there was any gold in it in our various. We do daily testing of the water that comes out of the discharge and goes into the river, so that we know that it's always within limits. So we would have picked up gold. No, there's nothing of interest there.
And I think this next question, I'm not sure what it's in reference to, but it might be to the visit today. But an investor would like to know, where will it be announced?
Put out an RNS reach. We'll put out an RNS reach, which is an announcement. It's not a price sensitive announcement. We put out an RNS reach. We put it out on all the usual channels, Twitter and all the rest of it. X, sorry, and all the rest of it. So you'll find out about it, I'm sure, if you're plugged into any of those.
Great. Well, I think that's all our questions that we've gone through. I don't know if there's any sort of final thoughts that you'd like to add, George, before we sort of round this off.
Look, I thank you, Lauren. I appreciate all the questions, and thank you for organising this. It's been really, I think, hopefully really useful. Happy to do this more often. There's nothing we're hiding, but there are times when, and people will think that maybe we're hiding bad news. Well, I think I'm afraid we put out the bad news when it comes, and this is beyond our control. It has been beyond our control. The permit levels were beyond our control, and the situation is beyond our control in terms of the level of water that's coming in. But we are doing our damnedest to fix it, and I think that's the most important thing that shareholders need to know. We've got the right people on the case to fix it. We need a little bit of help from the regulator and a little bit of understanding, and we're seeing signs that is happening, which I'm really grateful for. Only, as I say, getting off the phone today, that is the case, and they're trying to find a resource to help us move this forward quicker than would otherwise be the case. So watch this space on that, and as I say, things that we can improve, PR and all the rest of it, and communications, we will do. So we're happy to have the questions, the good ones, the bad ones, the ugly ones, all of them, and we understand the frustrations, and as I say, we're doing our damnedest to turn this around as quickly as we can. But other than that, get over this hurdle, get down, start exploring as we want to do. We will get there. I'm confident of that, and we'll get down and do the exploration work we wanted to do. We wanted to be doing it now, but we will be doing it, as soon as we possibly can. Great.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to hearing some more updates from Alba in the future. And thank you again.
Thanks so much. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for your questions.
Thanks so much.